The episode of The Office that is the most popular one I ever wrote is called Business School. The secret of that episode is it's just a very well-balanced episode, balanced between hard comedy and non-comic emotional elements. So the way this story was constructed, it was the second episode that I had ever written on The Office. I was hired in season 3. The show was already up and running. I joined a staff of people who had created the show, and I had to figure out what the show was and how to write it. The first episode I wrote was The Merger, and that episode was a total failure in my first draft. I had the tone completely wrong. It was joke, 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 joke in my writing of it. And Greg Daniels pointed out that's not the way we do The Office. We separate out the comedy from the drama. That was the first big insight I had about writing The Office. When I figured that out, I wrote The Merger well. The episode was well received. Second episode that I wrote was also in season 3. It was called Business School. Now, where did the idea come from? Came from the same place that all the ideas in The Office came from. There was a wall in the office that was covered with 3x5 cards, and each of these cards represented a pitch that somebody had had at some point for an A story, a B story, or a C story. And the head writer, Greg Daniels, would just go and pluck cards off and try to combine them into an episode. So it would have looked something like this. There was a pitch for Ryan's Business School, where Ryan brings Michael as an example of a failing business. There was an idea that came from a writer named Jen Salata, who had worked in an office where a bat got caught in the ceiling and they had to evacuate the office. So that was called The Bat. And then there was an idea that Pam, who's an aspiring artist in the office, has her first art show. So these cards were pulled down, and the idea was, can we combine them all into one story? Well, I knew that we had one thing that was definitely going to work big, which was Steve Carell doing a presentation to a business school. Now, the reason I thought this was going to work was Steve is such a huge performer of comedy that I thought if we just locked him off doing a presentation to a group of people, in this case, a bunch of kids listening to him, this was going to play to Steve's performance, presentational, stage comedy chops. And that's exactly what happened. If you watch the episode, Steve is just doing set piece comedy, bringing out a book and tearing the pages out of it, pulling candy bars out of his pocket and tossing them to the students. Very big performative stuff. We would do the takes. The audience of kids would sit there silent, pretending to be horrified by his performance. And as soon as we called cut, the kids would just burst out laughing. And so Steve had this constant feedback loop of performing to an audience and getting laughs, and that worked exactly as well as planned. In the B story, we also had hard comedy. It was Jim versus Dwight, which always worked, in a very physical comedy with a bat trapped in the ceiling. We had a live bat that we used in there with an actual bat wrangler who would took this seemingly heavily sedated bat and would put it in various parts of the office. We had a mechanical bat on a stick, and we had a remote control bat. It was all very, very physical and broad and funny. And that was important because it was balancing against a story that was actually very subtle and emotional and small in terms of its comedy, which was Pam's art show. And Pam's art show becomes the emotional core of the story. Now, with this one, I got very lucky because there was something in the Pam's art show story that related to emotions that I had been through and that Jenna had been through. The story is basically about an artist having the experience that all artists will eventually have of thinking, oh my God, you know, I am special. And I'm going to show how special I am with my screenplay, with my spec TV episode, with my one-man show, with my painting, with my song, or in this case, with Pam, with her art show. Every artist knows that feeling of thinking, this is going to be the moment where I prove how special I am, and then being crushingly disappointed. That feeling, when you've had it, is unforgettable. I've had it many times as a writer, and Jenna had had it as an actress. You know, if you read Jenna's autobiography, she came from St. Louis, Missouri, drove out to LA in like a little Toyota Celica, and for 7 years, she auditioned for movies and TV pilots, getting a better and better reputation, but never able to fully support herself as an actress. She always worked as a temp, and after 7 years, she just decided, I haven't made it, I'm quitting. She told her manager, her agent, and her family, I'm going back to St. Louis. It's over for me as an actress. Fortunately, her manager and her acting coach convinced her to do one more season of auditioning for TV. She did, and she got The Office. That was the breakthrough of her career. But she never forgot that feeling of, oh my God, I didn't make it. And in this episode, Pam's Art Show, that is what she is sharing with you on screen. And when an actor does that, shares their true, painful, vulnerable experience on screen, it's always very powerful. That's the core of the emotion. Now, this episode has what's called a dovetail ending. A dovetail, if you look at the tail of a dove, it goes like this. The two points of the tail come together. In the A story, Michael's business school experience, and the B story, Pam's Art Show, the two stories come together in the same ending. Michael has been humiliated. He went thinking he was going to be celebrated as a master of business. He finds out he's been brought as an example of a failing business, and it's heartbreaking for him. Pam is hoping to show what a great artist she is. Nobody comes to her art show. The only one who does come mocks her, and she hears it. She also has a feeling that she was going to be celebrated and actually fails. The two of them have the same experience, and the dovetail ending is Michael coming to her art show and saying, oh my God, Pam, you painted a picture of The Office. You've celebrated The Office. You get how important The Office is. You're a great artist who understands what we do. Now, I fought this ending when the story was pitched to me. I said to the head writer, Greg Daniels, this violates the principles of story as I understand them. The principles of story are a character has a goal, there are obstacles to that goal, but in the end, they get what they want. Pam wants validation as an artist, and in the end, she doesn't get it. She knows Michael is a buffoon. The fact that he wants to buy her watercolor of The Office does not validate her as an artist. It does not satisfy her goals. It doesn't work as an ending. And Greg said to me, you're missing it. She doesn't get what she wants and she needs. But it's kind of like if you had a bad day and your dog comes and curls up with you on the couch and comforts you. It's that kind of ending. She doesn't get what she needs, but she gets a little something. And Greg, of course, was right. That's the ending that we committed to. After we did this episode and the story aired, Steve Carell, who we all very much admired, pulled me aside and he said, I really liked your episode. Steve Carell is a fan of what he calls small victories. His favorite kind of ending in movies, TV shows, and everything is the one where the character has a small victory. Business School is an example of a small victory. It's why Steve Carell liked it, and it's why I think people consider it their favorite Office episode that I ever wrote.